Well, hi, everybody. Meteorologist Joe Cioffi. Welcome to the Joe Cioffi Weather Show on this 25th of November, with Thanksgiving so late this year. We have a really busy night tonight, and there's a few things there's a number of things I want to get to for sure. Let me first off, I got to invite everybody that's on my meteorologist Joe Cioffi weather app, because if you didn't know, I've said it 100 times, but if you didn't know, just in case, you can watch the live streams right from the app. So I just want to give a big welcome to all the app users. We also are going to welcome our users from Facebook, who also may be jumping on as we go through this live stream tonight, with two major winter storms and a major blocking pattern that is setting up. Let me just also let you know that we are going to attempt a Joe Cioffi, so a Joe and Joe Weather Show on Wednesday, the getaway day for Thanksgiving. I spoke to Joe today, and he suggested that we do it on Wednesday. So I have concurred. I'm going to test the Skype connection beforehand to make sure everything's going okay, and we will go from there. So we've got a major blocking pattern happening. We have two major winter storms. All of this is tied together. The first storm coming out, which is impacting Colorado and Nebraska and parts of South Dakota, northwestern Kansas, that is going to be a very big player in starting the blocking process. That low is eventually going to become the blocking low that'll be sitting near Newfoundland. And then we have the second wave of energy that's coming into the west. And you should see, when we're going to get to the warnings map, it's like the whole western half of the United States is really lit up like a Christmas tree. So let's get started here. Also, there's a big difference, by the way, there's a big difference between a negative North Atlantic oscillation and a blocking pattern. In this particular instance, we have a block with a negative NAO, but it's different than what we had last year in December. I know, Scott Briller, you were talking about this in the conversation pre-show, but it's a whole different scenario, and I'll get into it when we get to that point. But take a look at the watches and warnings map tonight, because we haven't had it this busy in quite a while. We are looking at winter storm warnings up for a huge portion of the nation. Most of California, some of the coastal counties. I was looking at the snow levels up in northwestern California. They're down pretty low, in some cases down to 1,500 feet. That's not that high. And we've got winter storm warnings that actually extend down into some of the mountains that are to the west and northwest of Los Angeles. So we have them down even into Southern California. Of course, the Sierra Nevadas, where there's probably going to be every bit of 2 to 3 feet of snow out of this. We have a spraying of winter storm warnings from southwestern and southeastern Oregon, and a number of winter weather advisories and winter storm watches kind of peppered in between, because you have the mountainous terrain. So in some instances you have a shadow effect, and in some instances you don't. Then it goes back to some more warnings in Nevada. In the middle of all of this, you have high wind warnings. You have dust storm warnings up for parts of Southern California, believe it or not. A few areas dealing with, I think, in Southern California, the southernmost coastal counties there. That looks like those could be flood watches or flash flood watches, or possibly even coastal flooding. We'll take a more specific look in a second. Then, of course, we've got the winter storm warnings that are up for Colorado into Wyoming. There's actually, it looks like, one county in Wyoming right now, or at least part of one county in Wyoming, where we have a blizzard warning. You really can't see it too well on this map, but if you look really close, there's a little red orange blotch there. So that is your blizzard warning that is posted. And I'm just, by the way, I just want to come back to the live board for 1 second here. I just want to double check to make sure everything today has not been going well technically. So please let me know in the next 15 seconds here if there are sound issues. If I'm sounding okay, I assume that it is. I'm not seeing anyone saying that the sound is too low. I've lost the internet today about 5 or 6 times. So we just were able to reboot it back up a few minutes ago, and hopefully it will hold. Johnny Quest, thanks for hitting Super Chat tonight. Really appreciate it on this Thanksgiving week. So as long as none of you seem to be saying that there's a sound issue, I'm going to keep on going because I can't see, I'm not going to be able to see the chat, and I don't want to risk losing the wireless signal here. Thanks, Ruthless. Really appreciate that. No, everybody's saying the sound is good. Okay, excellent. Yes, it's a little rough with that 30-second delay. So let's get back to this watches and warnings map. Sorry for the technical issues, folks, but it just happens. Maybe one day it'll get to a point where technical issues will be at a minimum. We're also, by the way, seeing winter storm warnings extending northeastward now with this first low coming out. The warnings have been extended to northwestern Iowa, southern Minnesota, and into much of northwestern Wisconsin. We have watches up for the upper peninsula of Michigan, starting out with the high wind watches up for Illinois, most of Illinois, Indiana, western Ohio, southeastern Michigan. We'll likely see winter wind advisories gradually expand as we move through Tuesday and get into Wednesday and Wednesday night, Thursday, particularly in the Northeast where wind is going to be a big deal. I don't know if you can see it there on the lower left. You should be able to. It looks like about 2/3 of the state of Alaska is under a winter storm warning, and there's some energy that's running up into Alaska from the Bering Sea. So it's a very, very busy, active Pacific, and for snow lovers, you want to see that to a large degree because at least you're not seeing that fire hose jet. We're far from anything resembling that fire hose jet that we had last year. So here's what it looks like on the surface map. We've got our first low now beginning to form in southwestern Wyoming or northeastern Utah, right on the borderline there. And you can see the snaking cold front that is down into Southern California and pushing southward. You've got the frontal boundary just sort of meandering its way across North Texas and then swings on up to low pressure that is up in the western lakes. Meanwhile, here in the east, it's been high pressure up and down the east coast. And the low from yesterday, which got pretty well wrapped up off of southeastern New England, there was actually a lot of convection that developed when the low deepened early yesterday with some thunderstorms that showed up along the coast of southern New England. Well, that low now is sitting between New Brunswick and Newfoundland, and it looks like it's all occluded out. So we're going to just send it on its way to the northeast and get things moving. It is one of these surface maps where it's it's a bit disorganized at the moment, but it won't be for much longer as we get that first low to start coming out. Now, here's what the Weather Service is doing with their forecast for snow. Now, bear in mind that some of what you're seeing here in the western flank of this, when you go back toward Nevada and you go to California and Oregon, this is with the upper low that is going to be diving southward. The first piece of this moving out to the east is what you're seeing producing snows in Colorado, Wyoming, and swinging through Nebraska and Wisconsin. This is total snowfall through 7 a.m. Thursday, and the amounts are fairly large. We'll bring it a little closer here, and I have some tight views so you can take a look. But you can see some of the big numbers being generated with a foot plus in the Denver area, and just to the north of Denver, you're talking maybe up to about 2 feet. It looks like from what I saw in the models late this afternoon and what's showing up on the radar that should play out. This is one of those areas where I'm not really too familiar with how the local climate works. I've learned a lot by watching over the last couple of years, but it's the folks who live there. Ruthless Goat, one of our regulars here, of course, so you know how your local climate works. It's kind of hard for me to get a good feel for this, but I sort of understand what's going on with the dynamics. And certainly the dynamics support some of these big snow amounts that you're seeing. And this has been a really bonanza autumn for this area. Snowstorms that came in October. We had the Yellowstone snowstorm at the end of September. So it's been pretty busy here for the autumn months in the northern and in the central Rockies. And we're seeing now, after like a bit of a brief lull, the maps are just going gangbusters with everything that's on there with all this energy. Now here's your snow forecast. I pulled up a few Weather Service tight view snow forecasts here. So you're seeing a foot for Denver, 15 for Boulder, Fort Collins, 18. So you start to go south. There's a very sharp cutoff here, by the way. You go south of I-70, not showing much of anything as far as snowfall amounts. Nothing in Colorado Springs. It's like, you just go from 0 to 9 inches. And that was one of my concerns when I was looking at the NAM today, where you're seeing, there's a very, very sharp southern cutoff to all this. So it wouldn't be a shocker where you'll wind up in some places going from literally 0 to a foot over a very relatively short distance, or at least 0 to 6 inches. So once you go north of I-70, you start to see, well, when I see I-70 at about Burlington, and then there's that connection that goes from Lyman down to Colorado Springs. So from that part of the interstate, I'm assuming that's the interstate, northward, that's where you're going to see that really sharp pickup in snowfall. And then we jump over to the Wyoming side. This is from the Weather Service in Cheyenne, and they're going for 20 in Cheyenne. Wheatland at 16. Some really big numbers there as you head up toward Douglas at 8 inches. Now, I don't have all the other maps from the northern the northern fringe of this, but you get the idea. It's going to be pretty much southeastern Wyoming, northeastern Colorado that bears the brunt of this. Now, I want to go over to California because we are seeing some big numbers there, and I pulled up, this is from the Weather Service in Eureka, California, and their snowfall forecast map, which was a little hard to find. You would think that they would have a tab for winter weather on their Weather Service website, but they don't. So I was trying all sorts of ways of trying to pull up this map separately rather than pulling it up on the graphic, and I was not having any sort of luck with it. But you'll notice that the snow levels in some of these areas are dropping down to very, very low numbers, 1,500 feet in Del Norte, Northern Trinity falling to 1,500 feet, Humboldt falling to 2,000 feet, and Southern Trinity and Mendocino falling down to 2,500 feet. And there are, some of these snow amounts that are being generated here are on the order of 18 to 24. And actually, some of the higher terrain, not that far from the coast, putting up some numbers as well. And I did also, because we don't get to do this very often, looking at the Weather Service from Medford. So you see some of the numbers here, and you notice how some areas it goes way up, and then suddenly it goes way down, and then it goes way up again. Well, that's, you got mountain, valley, and you get the shadow effect in some places. So, for example, 1 to 2 inches being forecast for Medford, but you head into some of the mountain passes to the northwest, and you're talking about 6 to 8, and you head up to some of the higher mountain tops to the northeast, and you're talking about 12 to 18. And to the south, Mount Shasta City showing up with 18 to 24. So just a few examples of what all this storminess is going to be producing. And again, all of this is tied to whatever's going to wind up happening here in the eastern part of the U.S. And here's something you don't see too often, but we actually have risk for severe weather tomorrow. This is from the Storm Prediction Center. And this is valid for 7 a.m. Tuesday to 7 a.m. Wednesday. We have a slight risk of severe weather from northeast Louisiana up through much of the state of Missouri, and a marginal risk that extends northward from there, and even a general risk of thunderstorms going all the way up north of Chicago and on up into Milwaukee. These places have all seen their first accumulating snows of the season, and now we're talking a late season a potential round for severe weather. So one thing for sure with weather, you get just when you think you sort of had these hard and set ideas of how weather's supposed to occur in terms of seasonality, and then just when you think you have it all figured out, something comes along to throw in a wrench to the normal course of things. But at least it gives you an indication of just how much turbulence we're dealing here in the atmosphere. Now, I brought up WPC's 3-day precip forecast, and then I also brought the 7-day precip forecast map up, which we'll pull up in a second. And you'll notice, so the 3 days are going to carry us through Thursday evening. So whatever you see in the Northeast is going to be from the system that is coming out of the Rockies now for Wednesday and Wednesday night. And of course, all the measurable precip that you're seeing at the moment, say from Colorado eastward to the Great Lakes, that is all from the lead system. What you're seeing along California and points southward, that is from the second upper low that's dropping down. And let us not forget that we have this tropical moisture that's getting injected to the northeast across Baja California and Mexico, and that's going to be coming into New Mexico and Texas. And that's going to probably form its own area of rain, sleet, and snow as it moves on up to the northeast. That's the one I'm probably the most curious about because of the fact that it's got this tropical connection as to how much precip you could see out of this, and if it's going to be cold enough. I would think certainly in elevated areas in New Mexico that it will be cold enough. Now, how far down to the lower levels does it get? I don't know, but it'll be interesting to see how this all plays out. And of course, it's so complex with two major storms and this tropical feed that's coming in from the southwest certainly tells you that you got a ton of energy here in the west that's going to have to be rectified in the atmosphere in the next 7 days or so. And speaking of the 7-day map, now here's the 7-day precip map, and what strikes me is, at least from WPC standpoint, and this takes us to Monday morning, actually showing at least 1/2 to 3/4 of an inch in southern New England, and 3/4 of an inch to 1.25 inches back through New Jersey and Pennsylvania. And of course, you see the big amounts over the next 7 days. Now, some of this is going to be combining the two systems because of the severe weather risk area, but you got a fairly large area of 3 to 5 inch rainfall risks from eastern Oklahoma northeastward into Kentucky, southern Indiana, southern Illinois, and in through much of Tennessee, northern Mississippi, and back through much of the state of Arkansas. And also in the west, you've got that tropical feeder going into the southwest. You've got the energy coming down from the northern part of the jet, dropping through southern California. So a ton of precip being generated up and down that state. And there were some stories last week about the fact that it suddenly, California. California is one of these places, by the way, there's never a happy medium there. Either they're very wet or they're very dry. And we know that when they go through a 5-year drought, and they literally will get 5 to 6 years worth of rain in one rainy season over the winter. And that's exactly what happened during the El Nino year. So suddenly the drought, is in a matter of a couple of months undoes 5 years of dry weather. Now have been seeing stories about the fact that it's gotten dry. It hasn't gotten to drought, but it's gotten dry again. So now we're seeing, with this busy Pacific and this split flow, this is ideal for bringing in weather systems into the West Coast and particularly into California in the next, if this split flow pattern holds, at least through the month of December. And of course, having that split flow pattern is going to be important to the longer term with respect to the Northeast. So Ruthless Goat, who has told us that it's snowing heavily where he is, well, you can see it blossoming out on the radar. Looking at the radars in this area, in this region, is very tricky because there's a lot of mountains, so you don't really get a full sense of how much precip is actually going on. We've got some activity down through parts of southern Utah and into southern California, and you're starting to see some scattered activity coming into Washington and Oregon, but nothing organized at the moment. So let's look at a couple of satellite loops here. I brought up a whole bunch because very impressive with everything that's going on. First off, take a look at what's down south of the Aleutians. So you've got a fairly well-defined storm system that is, I'm going to make that circle just a little bit smaller here. Hang on one second. But right in here, you've got a well-defined storm sitting right smack in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, right near the date line. And of course, you've got the corresponding southerly flow ahead of it. If I were to draw, let me draw this a bit better. So here's your trough, and of course you can see that you've got this jet that's coming in into the Pacific Northwest and dropping southeastward. In the meantime, we noted yesterday, you still have, look at this feed from just about to the equator to Baja California, and then I can't even make my arrow there, to Baja California. There's an upper low out here to the west, and that's pulling in this long fetch of tropical air right west to east across the tropical and subtropical Pacific, and bringing it into Mexico and shooting it up into New Mexico and Arizona and into Texas. So there's really a lot happening on this water vapor imagery loop on the Pacific side. And again, no fire hose jet. If we had a fire hose jet, in case you're not familiar with what I mean by a fire hose jet, I'm going to draw it in, let me see if I could pick a better color. So let's try, you want to call that salmon? But a fire hose jet is basically a jet that goes west to east from the Pacific across the United States, and you really don't, you have, short waves that move along it, but you don't have the amplitude, like you have here, where you have the really deep trough that is showing up. Hang on, folks, my mouse is stuck. Hang on. All right. Come on. There you go. Again, here instead you've got this, lots of amplitude, flow being split into two directions. I mean, this is not a signature. If you're looking back to last year and saying there's no comparison between the two, and it's going to lead to two different. I think it's going to definitely lead to two different outcomes when it comes to overall weather. Also, look at the moisture that this is destined to move into Oregon and down through California and Nevada and point south. You got all this Pacific moisture, this very, very strong jet that's running across the Pacific, west to east, and just now some of that moisture beginning to arrive, and you saw that in the form of some scattered showers. And you can also see a fairly big storm on the upper left that's in the Bering Sea, and that is running toward Alaska. So that's probably why you have that huge area of winter storm warnings. And the other area I wanted to show you here, which I think we need to pay very, very close attention to with regards to the weather for late week and this coming weekend, is up here in Canada. It probably doesn't go far enough, but there are two things we're going to have to watch. The first order of business is going to be whatever kind of blocking low that we wind up seeing forming somewhere here near Newfoundland or just south of Newfoundland. And the other thing that we're going to watch for is energy that's now up in Siberia that's going to cross the Arctic Ocean and come into northern Canada, north of Hudson Bay, and we're going to have to see how far south that energy gets. Okay, because if it doesn't get if it gets too far south, it's going to impact the flow and perhaps create a storm track that's more to the left. If it stays pinned up in Canada, where we will see much more higher pressures across Canada, and of course extending back even further out toward Greenland and up in northern Labrador, then you're going to have a different story, because anything that's coming down here is going to want to be forced. Is going to wind up being forced further south. And in fact, if you look here, at least from the standpoint, if you want to get an idea of what a block does, this is going to change, but at least in the position that it's in, if you look at the low that's up between Nova Scotia and Newfoundland, yesterday's low, and you see some of this moisture that's moving across the Great Lakes, you'll notice that it's kind of having a tough time moving to the northeast. It's having an easier time moving west to east underneath it, and that's what a block does. The difference is that this low that's in between New Brunswick and Newfoundland is moving away. So that's going to allow this disturbance behind it, the higher clouds, to change course. Meanwhile, look at the blossoming cloud cover back through Colorado and Wyoming. That's your developing system here. This is the snow that's going to be hitting Colorado, southeastern Wyoming and northeastern Colorado, and eventually into Nebraska and into South Dakota, and heading on up to the northeast towards Wisconsin. So if we look at least from the standpoint of the satellite signature here, that little max, it's not a huge system, but it's a tight little lobe of energy in the flow that's getting amplified as it moves east of the Rocky Mountain Range and starts to move eastward. And it's getting some of that amplification thanks to all the energy that's coming in from the northwest behind it to kick it along, and also that feed that is coming up from the southwest. So let's look at the NAM. The NAM first. This is for tomorrow morning, so I think we can probably back it up just a little bit. And by the way, satellite and radars, as you know, it's 7:25 Eastern time. So anything you see here from that standpoint is dated. And be sure, if you want to check local radars and the latest weather information, to go to your local National Weather Service forecast office page, and you can find that by going to weather.gov. Maps courtesy of Tropical Tidbits, and if we get to show them later with the European, those are also courtesy of Pivotal Weather. So there's your Colorado low coming out. You see how the NAM just kind of spreads out this area of snow overnight into Tuesday morning. And the prior run, by the way, I'm just going back a couple of runs just to show you a little bit of consistency here. But I went back 4 model runs, and you can see how the snow area really hasn't changed very much in terms of how the NAM has perceived this. And the position of the surface low is about the same. Really hasn't changed very much over the last 5 or 6 model runs. So certainly you have to have some confidence here that this is all going to play out. And then the low starts to run out to the northeast. It's about a 990-ish low. Begins to lift up toward the Great Lakes during Tuesday night, early Wednesday. You could see bands of showers extending down into Mississippi and into Arkansas. That could wind up being where you'll see some thunderstorms and the potential for severe weather. In the meantime, look at the 985 low that actually gets down to about a 975 low as it moves right along the coast. The gradient here is really tight here, coming into northwestern California and southwestern Oregon. So there's going to be some fairly fierce winds here, storm force winds, I think, as the low comes ashore. So you've got 2 major storms here. The 89 low in northern Missouri on the Missouri-Iowa line. This is at 10 p.m. on Tuesday night, so about 26 hours from now. And you've got this wrapped up animal coming into northwestern California. And then as we move into Wednesday morning, your heavy snow shield during the overnight Tuesday night spreads up into Minnesota and Wisconsin, kind of expands a bit on the northwest side. And your low now across the northern lakes begins to move east, or you might even actually have a bit of a center jump there. But this is our wind machine in the northeast for Wednesday night and Thursday. Looks like there might be a little bit of snow for Maine because it's for Maine, okay, and it just always snows there. But there might be some lake effect going on for Wednesday night into Thursday morning off Lake Ontario and Lake Erie. You can see the NAM is fairly bullish here. You've got a very, very tight pressure gradient that is going to develop. And I think this is going to be problematic for the parades in New York and in Philadelphia, New York City and Philadelphia, because there is a balloon threshold. I don't remember what it is, if it's 20 miles an hour or 25 miles an hour, but I know in instances where it gets pretty gusty, we're talking, I think that there could be gusts of 30 to 40 out of this. So that might be problematic for them to launch the balloons. I don't make that decision. That's my never to be humble opinion. They have their own people that they talk to, and they'll decide. So by Thursday morning, that storm is now near Nova Scotia. Again, that is going to become our blocking low. And of course, you have the next system in the California system that comes in Tuesday night and takes its time, but it just kind of, when lows come into California, and in the West Coast like this, sometimes they can be really strong. You're talking 978 pressure. That's like a Category 1 hurricane from the standpoint of pressure. And then because of the mountainous terrain and everything else, you see these lows sort of jump around a bit. So it's hard to find continuity. If you look carefully on the NAM, on Tropical Tidbits or on any of the models, you'll notice that the isobars do all sorts of crazy things out there. Eventually, the energy translates to the other side, and by the time we get to early Friday morning to 1 a.m., you've got a 95 low in southwestern Utah, and you got all the scattered areas of precip. By the way, that tropical moisture that comes across Baja, California, into New Mexico and into Texas, there's some snow that develops with that. Models have been kind of handling this in all sorts of ways, either ejecting it east. This time around, they seem to be lifting it more north into the Dakotas. I'm not 100% sure if that's correct or not. The one constant in all of this, in terms of what you see on the surface map, is that high, that 1036 or 1038 high that's up north of Lake Superior. So you've got higher pressures spreading out across Canada, and that's usually what happens when you get into a blocking pattern. Now, let's discuss that pattern and what it means. And we're going to shift to the GFS. Actually, we'll shift to the European. Okay, and we'll go to the North America view, and we're going to go to the 500 millibar, 18,000 foot level. So let's start with tomorrow morning, 12Z Tuesday. You've got your trough in the west. I think it's pretty obvious here. You've got that trough there that is running down from Wyoming to Colorado south. Upper low, steering that tropical moisture, okay, and that upper low offshore. And you've got a short wave right in here that's about to move in. Deep storm and a split flow in the middle of the Pacific. And that jet runs down, that is part of the jet that you see, running down through Southern California. And then the northern part of this is split out there, and some of it heads up into Canada. You also have this blocking high that's over Greenland. I mean, this is a real mess in a lot of ways. And the Atlantic, you've got a strong west to east flow, but that upper high has got it suppressed pretty far to the south, and there are a couple of short waves out here that are moving right along. So this is what we're starting with for Tuesday. Now, the system in Colorado, that is the important one. This is the one that's going to become the block. So when we get to Wednesday morning, it's approaching the western lakes. Now you've got all this energy diving down into California, still got the blocking high that's up near Greenland, and in general, higher pressures across the higher latitudes up to the polar region. Thursday, upper low in the Gulf of Maine. And now you start to see, when we get to Friday, you're getting to see what happens when you get into a blocking situation. And this is going to become what we call the 50-50 low. And we call it the 50-50 low because it's a reference to its latitude and longitude, 50 north and 50 west. And with that low there, one of the things that it does, among other things, and the key to this is, by the way, that it sits there for a while. It can't just get into that spot and just keep on going. It has to sit there for a couple of days and set the flow up. And that's what it's doing here. If we draw in the rest of the jet stream, You've all throughout the region in Canada is where you have higher than normal pressures. Your mean jet stream flow is suppressed way to the south, okay? And with higher pressures to the north, there's actually a bit of a weak Canadian cold connection that is on the backside of this 50-50 low and comes down into the northeast. So what winds up happening at the surface is that you wind up with a surface high across southern Canada, and you're going to need that in order to bring in at least some low-level cold air. Meanwhile, this energy here, which is our low in California, is going to want to move eastward because it's got this kicker system behind it, kind of pushing it along. It is the normal tendency for storms to kind of want to do this, go up and make the turn. Maybe I have it drawn a little bit too far west, but they do want to, as the snow lovers often refer to them as cutters. They like to cut west of the Appalachians. When you have a block, however, they can't really do that because you have higher pressures all through this region up here. So it's actually forced to go eastward. And the presence of the 50-50 low causes that to happen. Now, if the 50-50 low is too strong and doesn't get out of the way, you could wind up suppressing this pretty far to the south, okay? If the 50-50 low isn't strong enough, then you could wind up with this thing trying to go to the south, but then maybe makes a turn where you get the next low that's a coast tugger. Now, eventually, this is going to displace this low eastward. Okay, this is not going to sit out there forever. If it sat out there and was completely blocked from moving, then you would probably be talking about whether this system would pass by to the south and perhaps weaken because of the presence of the upper low to the east. But eventually this kicks this out. So this kind of this delicate balance that we're seeing in the atmosphere in terms of how this is all going to work. There's one other element here that is important. And I talked about this on my Patreon members only video today, the weather in 10. And that is this. Okay, took a little bit of a signal hit there, folks. So let's hope that that's the only one. Now, what I was saying was FS model run at this point. And this is what it was doing over the weekend. If you watch what happens with this was the run on for late this afternoon. I just switched it back and then it just kind of goes back on its own. All right, so let's go back to Sunday's run. Watch the system that is up in northern Canada and how it drops southward. And what it does is it drops southward here. You see it over Hudson Bay? It comes down really, really quick. It does two things. It displaces the block east of Newfoundland and starts to kick it out because the upper low from California is now moving eastward. But it also influences the track here where it almost tries to phase with that system coming from the west right in here. Oh, there we go, right here. So in this particular instance, you had models taking low or a primary low up into the Great Lakes and really never letting it go so that you would really wind up with just an arm of rain out of it and maybe some snow or ice in central and northern New England, and that would be it. Here's the change, and this was a significant change. It started with last night's model runs, and it continued today, and it continued even into the late afternoon cycle with the 18Z. And that is that and the European and the GFS actually were very, very close to each other, quite similar. But if you watch what happens with that system coming down out of Canada, it's not even close, okay? So the models seem to be saying that energy that's in Siberia that crosses the Arctic region and moves into northern Canada stays up in northern Canada. And that's very important because if you notice here, that upper low now gets shoved to the southeast and down into West Virginia and into Northern Virginia. And this could be significant when it comes to rain versus snow and weather that you might have. What I would call, what I usually call do-it-yourself cold air, where you have a very, very well-developed low and you wind up with cooling, dynamic cooling from the top of the atmosphere down, because you don't have you don't really have that much cold air to work with. And remember, we're at the end of November, beginning of December. It's very important to bear in mind that the average high in the New York City area, for example, this time of year is still well up into the at the end of the month, is still not that far from 50. Okay, so you're talking about a month where we had temperatures averaging 5 or more degrees below normal. That's a big departure. Okay, the way I look at the atmosphere in general is if it's +2 or -2, that's kind of in the range to me. If it's 2 degrees above or 2 degrees below, that's sort of in that range where most months should fall. So when you start to get departures that are like -5, that's fairly significant. And yet, even with a departure of 5 below normal, which is I think where we're going to finish November, either -5 or maybe a little bit higher than that, a little bit lower than that, like -6, or maybe it's higher. I don't know. I'm losing it. But the bottom line is, even with that kind of a departure, you see how hard it is to get snow here on the coast. You got to have a perfect setup, and perhaps this might be the opportunity to have something that produces some snow for areas that normally have to wait till the middle or latter part of the month to see their first snowfalls. And here is what it looks like on the tighter view. You see the block to the east in the upper air. You're still with all that shading of blue that's off of Maine and east of Massachusetts. That's from the upper low that's out to the east. It's not getting out of the way quickly, fast enough, so that the energy that shoots out from the west is forced to go southeastward. You see how it just drops like that? That's the upper low dropping. And if there's no Canadian connection coming down to force it to go northward, then this has the potential. I think this may actually have the potential to wind up being further south than what the models are showing, because if that block doesn't get out of the way, this may wind up going a lot more south than you think. So don't be too shocked if this, we still see adjustments that head from Delaware Bay. It's more like southern Chesapeake Bay, maybe even a little bit further south than that with the surface low. I'm just kind of openly speculating here. And of course, with the way the model handles this, the surface low is going to try to go to the north, but then the primary dies, and you see it here. This is for Friday night and Saturday. You see the big high up to the north. And again, if this were to keep moving to the northeast, you would just basically get this arm of rain that heads northward. But the low goes into southern Wisconsin. That primary low now is dying out. It's occluded out, and you have kind of a front that's like, hang on, let me just get this pen here. So you got a front that's kind of like this, and there's a point of occlusion that's somewhere down in Virginia. That's where the European has it, by the way. And from there, you get a surface low that develops, and now the primary is just about gone. This is Sunday afternoon, and the reflection from this run, and this goes back to something that the model did, I think it was on Friday, where it had this wrapped up low sitting off the New Jersey coast. It gets fairly deep here, and if you've got the upper low looking like that, it probably will be fairly deep. But we got to get here first. We've got a long way to go, and I think you're still going to see some model swings back and forth. We have to watch to see what that Canadian system does. Does it drop southward? Does it not drop southward? Certainly to see these runs today, both the GFS and the European were virtually identical in keeping that system in the Arctic region from dropping into Hudson Bay. As long as that remains the case, and as long as the block goes as advertised, then I think you have a shot. Down the road, around the 5th, it looks like we have another front coming through, and there's some colder air that comes into the mix. Who knows? A lot of what you're seeing here in the long range is going to be predicated on what happens late in the weekend, early next week anyway. So I really wouldn't show a whole lot of confidence in terms of whatever the models are showing past early next week, because that has to be rectified. You see how in today's scheme of things, with what we're dealing with, how these gears are all kind of intertwined, wrapped within each other, that the lead system has the impact on the second system, which has the impact on the third. So it's almost pointless to go speculating down, but we'll just kind of look at the numbers. There's two other things that I want to bring up. First off, the snapshot view of the Teleconnections, and this is from last night's 0Z run, when we started to see this sort of, that energy in Canada not coming down. You'll notice that the Pacific North America Index, which is off the wall negative, so showing lower pressures out in the west, actually rises up to just above the neutral line. So you're seeing big pressure rises going into December 1st. That corresponds to what we're seeing in the east. The NAO stays negative through the 3rd and doesn't get to the neutral line to about the 5th. So in terms of Sunday into Monday, we have a strong NAO, North Atlantic Oscillation, and that reflects the blocking pattern. Now, it is from the 0Z run, it flips back to positive after the 5th for a little while. We'll see, because if we took a snapshot of today's afternoon runs, I wonder whether you would get anything like this. Remember, teleconnections are not predictive. They are coincident indicators. They are not predictive indicators. And then, of course, we've got the EPO, the East Pacific Oscillation, which is, going to a strongly negative reading and kind of staying there through much of the first 10 days of December. So at the very least, it implies some colder air from Canada spreading out over North America. Now, how much of that gets into the east remains to be seen. But if you combine that with the negative North Atlantic Oscillation Index, it certainly would suggest that temperatures in the northeastern part of the U.S. and perhaps much of the eastern part of the U.S. are going to be near or below average for the first 10 days of the month of December. And that's kind of the conclusion that I would take out of this. Now, one other map I want to show you, and this is from WPC, their long-range snow. I thought this was pretty interesting. That very light green area is a 10% probability of at least 1/4 of an inch of liquid falling as snow or sleet. And if you notice, they do have the line to about New York City, touching the north shore of Long Island, just running right along the turnpike down from Newark to Trenton. And if you go not that far up the Hudson Valley in the darker green, that's a 30% chance of at least 1/4 of an inch of liquid. And you've got a 50% chance as you go further north up the Hudson Valley. If we see further shifts to the south, then when we look at this tomorrow, you are probably likely to see that 10% line pulled a bit further south. This was done at, I can't read the time because the state line is over it. Let me see if I take the state boundary off. Okay, so this was done at 16Z, so I'm guessing it was off the 12Z run. So if you were doing it over the 18Z run, you probably might want to, if you were doing it over that one, you probably would tug that 10% line a bit further south, and you would tug that 30% line also a bit further to the south. And if you want to just for laughs look out to the west, you're seeing now, of course, these we're looking at day 4, 5, 6, and 7 here. So I'll go to day 4, and you see where the snows are showing up for day 4 in the west, and then for day 5 they move further east, and you start to see this large area. Let me get the state boundary up again. For day 5, you see it's up into the Dakotas and into Minnesota. And on day 6, which is next Sunday, you have a few blotches there of 90% probability of at least 1/4 of an inch of liquid falling as snow up in the northern plains. So certainly is busy, okay? I guess that's the best way to describe it. It certainly is busy with respect to what we're seeing weather-wise here. And definitely, in my view, it's kind of been quiet, really, for the most part over the last couple of weeks when it's come to winter weather. We've had some, but it hasn't been a whole lot of it. So this is a pretty impressive outbreak that we have with the 2 weather systems running around. And, of course, that second one is we're going to be talking about it we may still be talking about it a week from now. So I see that a few of you had hit super chat tonight. Under this new studio tool that YouTube has, I can't see who. I saw Johnny Quest. I saw that you did. I'm scrolling back through the chat because I want to say thank you to everybody that hit super chat tonight, and I'm not seeing it. Oh, this is grand. Oh, well, I'm sorry. You know what? I will find out and I'll figure it out somehow. But it doesn't tell you anymore, and that's not good. Let's see if I can get it here. Maybe I can see if I pop the chat out. Sometimes it gives you a little bit more. Nope. I'm sorry. Whoever, those of you who, I know Johnny Quest that you did. So if you, for those of you who hit super chat tonight, thank you very much. I really, really appreciate it greatly, and I will try to find out who and thank you individually. I know the chairman. By the way, you'll notice I'm drinking tonight out of a "Trust Me, I'm a Meteorologist" mug that the chairman gave me at one of my talks last year, and it's wonderful. I've had it out. I just have forgotten to bring it on the live stream so many times. And tonight it was sitting in front of me because I had some coffee today. And it's a cool mug. And yes, you should trust me. And also, the goatee got trimmed today. I went to my hair guy, took care of me, buzzed my hair down nice and short, which is how I like it. And I'm a happy camper. So I know, Scott, you asked about off camera about Europe yesterday to me. So let me just bring that up for you. Oh boy, what a day! I'm just happy that this thing has been going. The internet signal here has been so frustrating for me today, and it has kept going down and coming back up. So I guess with only one interruption, I'm very, very happy about this, that I didn't completely lose it. So I'm just going to give this a cursory view here. You do have, this low that goes into Ireland on Tuesday night, Wednesday, fairly wrapped up gale center that moves in, and a little bit of cold air coming down from Iceland and Greenland there. But it doesn't look too bad going through the weekend and into next week. Maybe a bit on the cold side, on the chilly side. And then let's see what happens after that. You start to get to an Atlantic flow, so that's usually a bit warmer. And later on, past the 10-day period, now you start to, if this verifies, now you're starting to get some Greenland and Iceland air down with these streamers of snow off the North Sea. So, and further inland in Europe, you're getting some chances here. It's like a couple of storms that want to run down pretty far to the south into the Mediterranean. Here's one. And that produces a fair amount of snow in northern Italy and in points eastward. And then that goes out. And then we got another one that follows, this one to the north. And you can see that flow that comes straight from the north. This is, you got this low that's right up in western parts of Russia. So you've got this northerly flow that comes down from the Arctic regions, and that usually brings down to colder air into the interior of Europe. But this flow actually extends far enough to the west that it is bringing England some of that colder air. But this is way out into the long range. So, but just as a point of interest, at least with whatever gale center that comes in later this week. After that, looks like some calm weather to follow. By the way, if you're new to the channel, I hope you've hit the subscribe button with your Gmail account. Then you can get notifications because we do these live streams every day. And the Coffee with Cioffi graphic here is our Sunday morning. We do live streams almost every night. I usually take one night off during the week. But on Sunday mornings, we do our live stream at 10 a.m. And it's called Coffee with Cioffi. And you can It's just kind of a leisurely way. We sit back on a Sunday morning with our coffee, and you might have your bagel with you, or maybe you have tea instead of coffee. But you can sit, hang around. We do a easygoing, take our time live stream so that you're all caught up on the weather. And if the weather is active this weekend, I can tell you right now, we will have a live stream on Saturday, and we will have, of course, the Coffee with Cioffi on Sunday morning. If the blocking pattern that's being indicated materializes, and I can't see why it won't, at least to get us to the point where we're wondering about what's going to happen this weekend, you can. We're going to be here handling it, so no worries there. Still a little light on the thumbs up, says Okie AG. Okay, I'm not sure. I can't see the rest of that thread. William Uber, do you think there's going to be bowling week from Tuesday? Also school. Oh, no, you're doing something that I don't do, and that's school closings, pal. So that's for school districts. But if you're bowling tomorrow, are you bowling tomorrow, Bill? Because if you're bowling tomorrow, I may just pop up. Oh, Lisa Nieves, thanks, Timothy. Lisa, you hit super chat. I really appreciate it. Yeah, this new studio tool that YouTube is switched to for doing live streams. If I don't see the super chat hit when it happens, it disappears after like 5 or 10 minutes. So I just have to go back and look for it, and I have to look at it on the replay. So I apologize to those of you, because I'm really, I really try to acknowledge your generosity, and I really appreciate it. So I will get to the bottom of who gave tonight at some point. Master Chief, a very exciting way to kick off the month of December. Absolutely. Now, bear in mind, this is kind of unusual for our area, for eastern Pennsylvania to southern New England, maybe less so for the inland spots, but certainly for the coast. It's snowfalls this late in November or the very beginning of December don't happen too often. Okay, you have to really have a setup. If you're going to have it, it's going to have to come in a setup like this, where you've got upper air and blocking and going on. And we may have it at the end of the week. But again, we're at Monday, and I still think that there could be a lot of variability with respect to the models. There's going to be a lot of moving around that still may happen. And I would listen, don't discount the possibility that block holds on so long that it forces this next energy to go even further south, and there will be a tipping point where the presence of the blocking low could actually wind up affecting how strong it gets. So yeah, right now you've got a very wrapped up system that the models are showing. But that doesn't necessarily mean that wrapped up system is going to, you're going to be able to get that kind of a wrapped up system if, if you wind up with an overly strong block that just hangs out there longer and longer and longer. So, there's nothing here at this stage of the game, this very early stage of the game, that that we could even remotely say is written in stone. So just please bear that in mind. Okay, so I see Scott. Can you get Izzy D and I can't read that. Okay, I'm sorry. I just what is my preference on next weekend storm? Fyodor, you want me to give you an answer now? It's 6 days from now. Look, if you had to bet, I mean, if you want to put a straight bet in terms of odds and in terms of probability, you got to bet rain, okay? You have to bet rain, because this time of year, I would say, I don't know, about 99 times out of 100, but certainly 9 times out of 10, it's going to be rain. But you've got a special situation here with this blocking pattern and some marginal cold air and a lot of dynamics where you could get some strong vertical motion and dynamic cooling. We saw that happen. What happened yesterday in parts of eastern and southern Pennsylvania and into western New Jersey, where we wound up with a burst of snow and a lot of areas got a coating to an inch of it. That was all dynamic cooling. There was not, it was from the intensity of the deepening surface low to the offshore. You can do that when you've got the dynamics. So if we could do it with that, you have to ask yourself that if you could, a week later, the odd thing is, in the course of a week, the average temperature this time of year is still dropping very rapidly. So you're talking about the normal temperature a week, 3 degrees, okay? That's a lot. That is a lot. So if you wind up with a 3-degree cooler, if you seasonally adjust that 1 week, the air mass that we had yesterday, the kind of air mass yesterday with the developing coastal low, and translate it to next Sunday, that 3 degrees might mean instead of getting a small area inland, that you get a much larger area of rain changing over to snow. So bear that in mind. And I think the air is going to be a little colder for Sunday than it was for yesterday. Maybe we have a little bit more to work with, and we may have more dynamics. We definitely should have more dynamics to work with. So that is something to bear in mind. Yes, Scott reminding me that February 4th with a 2 o'clock start time at the Sachem Library. For those of you who are on Long Island, I will be at the Sachem Library in Sachem, New York, in Holbrook, New York. It's right off the LIE, exit 61. It's very easy to get to. You get off the exit, go up the service road, second traffic light, make a left, and it's less than a quarter of a mile on your left. You can't miss it. That's on Tuesday the 4th. Tuesday the 4th of February, and that will be at 2 o'clock Eastern Time. Daniel Fitzsimmons, will it snow next weekend for Long Island like around December 2nd, 2019? The models were showing a blizzard for that date. Models are not showing a blizzard for that date. The models are showing rain changing over to snow. You don't make determinations 6 days out regarding. See, here's the thing: you can't. You can't. We're 6 days away. Okay, we're 6 days away. This is where you have to. This is where you use you observe what's going on in terms of the models and everything else to get a sense, and also to look at those satellite loops and look at the water vapor imagery. You're getting a sense of what is actually working in the atmosphere, how the atmosphere is working right now. And now we wait. We know what to look for. We know that northern Canadian system that's way up, if it stays way up, then it's going to be mainly about the block. And there's not going to be anything coming down that's going to try to turn this low coming out from the west and turning it up toward the Great Lakes, where you take a primary to our west, and it's warm with mostly rain. So then if we're switching to the idea that, well, it's mostly about the block, then you're going to have to take other things into consideration. Is the block strong enough? Is it too strong? If it's too strong, it gets suppressed to the south. If it's not strong enough, then you could wind up with all this development, but wind up with a coast hugger, where coastal areas really just stay mostly rain, and then it just shuts off, and you get heavy snows much further inland. So that is not something like a question you ask 6 days ahead of an event. And I would think, over the long haul, we've gone through this, time and time again. You're never going to get an answer 6 days ahead of time. Daniel Weed, just showing my appreciation for this kind of expertise and discussion. Exceptional stuff. Thank you. Really appreciate it. Thank you very much. And I think you're new to the chat board, so welcome to the channel. And I'm glad you subscribed and you got your Gmail account, so you're doing good. And you'll get notifications. Peter Anderson, I noticed some trend in the model runs when compared to ENSO conditions. Is this just a coincidence? We have no El Nino going on right now. We have no La Nina going on right now. Everything's pretty normal. Maybe the water temperatures are a little bit above normal, but in terms of El Nino activity, I don't know where. Some people, I know some people have been saying, that there's an El Nino out there because one of the indicators, the Southern Oscillation Index, shows that there is an El Nino. But then again, this other index and they pull up another three-letter acronym shows that there's not an El Nino. I think if you look at the actual water temperature map, it will show you that there really isn't an El Nino going on. It's kind of, the ocean water temperatures are maybe a shade above normal from the last time I looked. But, it might be better if you kind of look at that and not so much with the indices, because the indices might be getting skewed because of whatever large geographic areas that they cover. Perhaps there's one area that's biasing those indexes. And I have to tell you, it gets out of hand with these acronyms, with these the NAO, the EPO, the PNA. And I was talking with a bunch of weather enthusiasts today, and I said to them, and I occasionally will read some of their conversations on some groups when I have time. Oftentimes, with some of them I'm friends with, so I'll see a comment that they might make, and just what strikes me is this run-to-run emotional roller coaster that they put themselves on, and it's just kind of needless. Just look at what's going on weather-wise. Follow the weather. Don't follow the indicators. You follow the weather. Follow what's in front of you. That tells you what's happening. If you look at that loop, those satellite loops that we showed you earlier, we saw where the jet stream in the Pacific and how it's working, okay? We saw the amplifying system that is moving through Colorado, and Ruthless Goat, heavy snow continuing where he is. You got your Spam and your Campbell soup ready, I hope. Like you showed on Facebook, your supply closet for these times where you may be locked in for a while. I think it's a little exaggerated because it does melt eventually. But still, getting back to my point, everybody gets all wrapped up in trying to find that magic bullet. Why don't you just let it happen? Sometimes it's just easier to sit back and let it happen. There you go. So Peter, the SOI, Anthony Orr, our other resident statistician, pointing out to Peter Bicker, the SOI measures the pressure difference between Darwin and Tahiti. How many of these things, how many hours are there in a day? Do you think I have time to look at all this stuff? And I don't understand what impact that has on weather on the other, down in the southern hemisphere versus the weather up in the north. See, that's a long range thing that I have no, I have no interest in. B, it's something that I've never been able to get my head around. And I give a lot of credit to those people that get into all that stuff and get into all these like super duper highly technical indices, and I don't understand it. It maybe I'm past the age of trying to be able to absorb this sort of stuff. But the bottom line is you can out index yourself. So just get away from that. Peter Bicker, get away from all those indices and everything else. You only need one model. I don't care which model you use. You need one if you want one, and that's it. You don't need to have they're all out there for you to use, but obviously, but there's no need for you to look at 8 or 9 different models. If you're forecasting and you're on point and you know what's going on, you can just look. All you need is one model to kind of help you with things. All right. Maybe you need to go to a second, but you don't need to go to 5, 6, or 7 models, because at that point you're going to wind up with 5 or 6 or 7 short-range solutions that, when you're talking about an area of geography you're forecasting where you're talking about one place getting snow, one place getting sleet, one place getting rain, okay? And each model has a different view of which of those places is going to get which type of precip. At some point, you're going to have to make a decision. Keep it simple. We know, now what we're looking for. And when we come back to our live stream tomorrow, we're going to look at those same things and we'll see what happens. Jeff Fowler, thank you so much for hitting Super Chat. I think, Jeff, you're new to the board. Welcome to my YouTube channel. And if you have been here before, I apologize ahead of time. And happy Thanksgiving to you. And let me just say happy Thanksgiving to everybody. This is a big family week. Can be a big stressful week. and it's a great eating week. So make sure you take a little bit of time. I will probably live stream on Thanksgiving Day, but I'll probably going to wait till sometime later in the evening when everybody is kind of settled and watching football or whatever it is they're doing. But we're going to have something to look forward to. Again, thank you very much, Jeff. Happy Thanksgiving to you, and welcome to my channel. And really, real quick, just a reminder in case you missed it at the beginning. The plan is to get Joe Rayo on Wednesday, getaway day, for a live stream for the Joe and Joe Weather Show, and we'll keep our fingers crossed. Like, I figured out the Skype audio thing. So as long as that's the case, we should have a pretty good audio, and we'll be. That was my one last remaining issue. Now, if only I can make sure that the internet stays up. Peter Anderson, every time there's a fluctuation in water temperatures, a drop or an increase, the models change in temperature anomalies across the United. Well, okay, the thing with the water temperatures are, and I don't know how much input though, how the input is with the water temperatures with the models. That's a model expert is required to answer that question. The thing is, with the water temperatures, they can very easily change given upwelling. So you can go from a plus 3 or 4 degree anomaly to a minus 3 or 4 degree anomaly in a very, very big hurry. So big storm out in the Atlantic Ocean might do that. So we get this development here in the Gulf of Maine from Wednesday that runs out south of Newfoundland for a little while, or just near Newfoundland, and churns up the coastal waters. You'll probably get some upwelling and some cooling in some of those warmer water temperatures. I've heard the argument both ways about whether the water is too warm or not warm enough, and what the impact might be or might not be. At the end of the day, you just have to wait for the event to set up to see what you're dealing with, and then you go make your forecast accordingly. So, okay, so I think we're going to leave it there. Let's see. Everybody's now, it's almost time to whether we're going to get a white Christmas or not. Let's get our first snowfall on the ground, and we'll see where it goes. We'll see where it goes from there. All right. Oh, Joseph Nurek is on. Nice. So let's good to see you here, Joseph. Okie AG, always good to see you. Doing well, I hope, in your neck of the woods. Cool the Amazing, also looking for the possibility that we could see a white Christmas. We shall see. And yes, Patricia Owens, I have my lecturing. I'm a Professor Joe tonight, but I'm kind of got that, pointed finger lecturing. Don't you be taking the model seriously. Okay, so all right, everybody, we'll wrap it up. Have a great evening. Thanks for being here. We will we'll be back tomorrow. We'll have our morning weather in 5. We'll have our live stream tomorrow night at 7 o'clock. Patreon members, you'll get your extra live stream, your weather in 10, plus some long range posts, which you, if you're a Patreon member, you get to read them. So think about joining my platform. It's just $2 a month, and that $2 goes a long way to support all the things that I'm doing in my ever expanding weather empire that I am trying to create, if you want to call it that. That's patreon.com/meteorologist Joe Cioffi. You can find links to it on my website, and also running around on my Facebook page. Don't forget to download my free weather app, because some of the stuff that I'm creating for Patreon does eventually find its way onto the app, and that's you can download that on Google Play or on the App Store. It's the Meteorologist Joe Cioffi weather app. If you just put Meteorologist Joe Cioffi, it will come up. And also download Angry Ben's weather app, the Angry Weatherman, for Android devices. And I'm hoping in a couple of weeks that it will be available for iPhones as well. Bill, don't be too shocked if I show up at the bowling alley. Okay, just letting you know. I might make a visit once the live stream is done. So hopefully you're bowling late into the evening. Okay, have a great night. Thank you very much, Okie AG. Really appreciate it, and your kind words, and of course a number of you your kind words. Thank you so much. Happy Thanksgiving. If you're traveling, be sure to check out the travel weather, because with all this stuff going on, there's definitely going to be some issues flying out from local airports. Not maybe so much here, but in other places. And of course, we've got the wind issues for the Northeast for later Wednesday night and for Thursday. We'll see you tomorrow.